Good morning. This is the Innovation Conversation. I'm Kevin Coop.
And I'm Tom Furphy.
So, Tom, it's is a good week to have the conversation that we're going to have since there's been news in this area. The FTC has basically is looking at Amazon and Google and Facebook, talking about privacy issues. Facebook and Google have also been hit with antitrust citations by the government. The EU is looking at antitrust rules that would really put a lot of teeth into enforcement. If they have antitrust complaints, they want to really hit them with multi-billion-dollar fines potentially. And looking at that, at the big four, right? Facebook, Amazon, Apple, and Google. And we had planned all along that what we wanted to talk about today, which is our last innovation conversation of 2020, and I'm certainly glad to see the year in the rearview mirror, is a movie that you actually recommended to me, which was The Social Dilemma on Netflix, which is kind of ironic in its ways. And it's a really interesting hybrid documentary drama that looks about the impact of social media.
Yeah, I guess to me, I was not surprised by, there's a lot of discussion on the mechanics of how these platforms work, right? And how it serves up data to you. When you respond to data, it serves up more data to you based on how you respond. And, I've been living for the last 15 years, I've been living in worlds where that is a kind of a core part of how the platform works. But for them to kind of then take it from that explanation of how these work to, the profit models of these businesses, right? And what is driving their motivations for how these work, and then ultimately what that's doing to society. To me, it is an absolute must-see piece for anybody in business, for anybody that spends time on these networks, and really for anyone with kids.
Yeah. I mean, the line, which I've heard it before, but it's particularly resonant in terms of its positioning on the documentary is, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product.
Absolutely.
And people don't realize that. And the thing that makes it so powerful is that in the documentary sections, I mean, the message is largely being delivered by people who built these systems. I mean, it's sort of built mainly on the work of this guy named Tristan Harris, who was the former, and this is a great title considering he did at Google. What he's talking about now is he was a design ethicist at Google who clearly became distraught about what he was seeing, and now has created something called the Center for Humane Technology. But it's him and people like him who are just sounding the alarm bells about people don't understand how invasive this technology is.
Well, and to a person, and these are fascinating people that they're interviewing, and early Instagram people, early Google people. The one gentleman that was on the team that invented, I think he was actually credited with inventing the like button on Facebook. And when you hear them talk about the original genesis of these capabilities, how excited they were for them. And the like button was designed to spread joy, right? And what a great feature when we can do that, and all the good feelings that we're going to promote by that. We had no idea that it would ever get to the point where if you didn't get likes for something, how devastating it could be for you. And then to hear all of them talk about the revenue models and their guilt over how these revenue models have driven the performance of the platforms, and how they've just basically degraded the experience, all for the commercial benefit of the company and serving this data up, and then seeing what it's doing to society. To see that how they've all gone from this incredible, we're doing all this really cool, innovative stuff and spreading all this joy, to, wow, we can make money on it and that's really good for our businesses, to the business model is now having this just horrible effect on people and society. you know, and then their overwhelming guilt that they've all felt, and they've all left those roles because of that. They're all off doing something else now, often interesting, but definitely not in the same area.
Yeah, there was the one guy, and this is fascinating. I mean, he talked about when he joined Facebook, which wasn't that long ago, and you forget how relatively new a company Facebook is. It's not that old,
Right.
and he was in charge of monetization. That was his job. He says they basically hired me and said, "Figure out how to make money on this thing,"
Yeah.
which he did clearly very successfully, and now has. I guess it's not buyer's remorse; it's seller's remorse.
Totally.
Think, what have I done?
Yeah. Yeah. It's and then how do you, now that you've created these engines, right, that you know, that advertisers covet because of the effectiveness of that advertising, right? Very efficient to get these ad messages in front of these users. And they did say there's two industries where your customers are considered users: technologies and drugs. Uh, you know, you have these.
Far apart.
No, they're not. Well, no, because it is. I mean, it's an addictive. Certainly, these are addictive platforms. But yeah, you know, to have, it's so hard for these companies now, and they have to, but it's hard for them to break. They've created this engine of a super effective ad serving to customers taking it up. How do you ultimately break that and transition it? Or maybe you just are willing to say, we're going to take a period of time where we're not going to have profits. You know, we're going to do the right thing for a quarter. I don't know. It'd be pretty tough to do that, but you know,
they're public companies.
They're public companies, right? They have shareholders too. You know, but I will say though, yes, public companies, but you know, the world has evolved to the point where public companies aren't only about generating profits, although clearly the value of the stock is often most driven by the profits generated by the company. But you know, with you know, ESG efforts and whatnot, you've got to be a good corporate citizen, a good societal citizen. You know, and maybe, you know, that is and it probably will take one of the platforms to lead, and maybe it takes you know, government intervention, you know, to force that to happen.
One of I thought the interesting things about the Social Dilemma was this hybrid nature, because in addition to the documentary parts, which is largely talking heads, because you know, they were not going to spend a lot of time inside Google or Facebook or any of those companies, right? Was they dramatized the impact of social media, mostly looking at one family, mostly looking at one kid, a young teenage boy who sort of gets radicalized politically by this, and finds himself on a fringe.
Yep.
And it was fascinating. But one of the other things that was really interesting, they kept going back to it, where they were showing a room with all these screens, right? And these three guys, all played by the same actor.
Yeah, it was Peter from Mad Men.
Right. And they were sort of the human representation of an algorithm, right? And looking at it and saying, and okay, we can do this, we can get him. And when he's off social media for a while, how do we get him back?
How do we get him back on? Right. And that was your ex is in a new relationship.
Right.
And that hooked him. Yeah.
And it was interesting because I have to say, when I was watching it, my first reaction to sort of the dramatization and stuff like that, I was going, I don't know that I love that.
Yeah.
I warmed up to it by the end, but I have to say, in after watching the movie, those are the scenes I think about more. Especially with the three guys playing the algorithms.
Yeah.
Every time I go on Facebook, I think about those three guys.
Right. Well, and the thing that was really cool about that is, and they each had a different angle on how the algorithm would work, right? One was about monetization. One was about like the
engagement,
sociological and psychological, and one was about more the mechanics. But it was almost like they were algorithms with a conscience, right? Because they actually debated. In some cases, they debated back and forth. Hey, do you think this is really the right thing to do? That was really cool the way they did that. It did seem a little goofy at first, but it was really good. I mean, it was hard hitting too, to show how they did take that boy through total manipulation, and radicalized him. And then the daughter, with the social shaming, and whatnot that she was facing, even though, when you look at just well, I guess some of it was pretty brutal. It's horrible. And then they showed the stats for what it means, for the suicide rates among teenage girls and preteen girls, and how those have been, absolutely, the rise in those is directly correlated with rise in social media.
In fact, now that you said that, I remember the moment I decided I liked the dramatizations, and I hadn't before that. It was the moment where I think she's in the bathroom, the young girl, and she's looking at her screen, and they're being brutal to her
About her ears.
about
Yeah.
her looks, right?
Yeah.
And she looks in the mirror, and I have to say, this one of the more powerful pieces of acting I've seen this year.
Yeah.
Just a tear goes down her cheek, and it was like I felt. I mean, you're the father of a daughter. I'm the father of a daughter. I felt for her. I mean, I just
Totally. Yeah.
um,
Brutal. I could not imagine at that age having that, environment to have to navigate. Oh my gosh.
yeah, I would have been. I would have been a total victim. Um, but it wasn't. And listen, I mean, the addictive nature of it, especially for young people. But we've clearly seen it in terms of in terms of how it dictates how they think about things only in one direction. They can be radicalized. They can
Oh
start
yeah.
conspiracy theories. I mean, we're seeing it play out in the culture. We're seeing it play out in politics.
The more you interact with it, the more you're fed it, and the more extreme you become.
Um, and I have to say that I've sort of found myself I'm really avoiding social media. I mean, I sort of was beforehand, but I've been more conscious about it. I mean, I'll put stuff from Morning Newsbeat up there, but I'm not putting personal stuff up there, and I'm not even looking for the most part, at other people's personal stuff on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. It's just because the movie affected me.
Yeah. Well, and the advice they were giving too is they said, be really, um, make sure, if you are to click a like button, make sure you really do like it. Um, the one guy said, um, don't ever click on a recommended YouTube video. Just always just browse, and go pick your videos that way. They talked about, uh, turning off notifications, right? So whether it's email,
Yeah.
messaging, or social media, turn off notifications. Go to that platform when you want to go use it. Don't let that platform kind of rule and run you, because that's how you get sucked in.
It
And
was
almost to a person, they had all turned off notifications.
Yeah. And there were people there who said, and I don't let my kids go. They were very strict about screen time.
Yeah, yeah, the one Pinterest dude, he had said, yeah, he doesn't, or there was somebody else that said that too, is, no social media before high school, which that would be tough with middle schoolers to say, no, you can't do it, but can totally see, that, a half hour before bedtime, phones come out of the bedroom. I think there's some really good advice in there. Really hard advice to enforce, though.
Yeah. One of the interesting things about it, I thought, was, I mean, they really focused a lot on Google and Facebook, and they didn't really talk about Amazon at all. And which is interesting because, I mean, in some ways, Amazon does the same stuff, right? It tracks you, it knows what you're doing, and responds to what you're doing.
Yeah.
But it is a very different business model than what Facebook and Google are doing, which I keep coming back to this when I comment on Morning Newsbeat about all the regulatory atmosphere. I think I can see looking at Twitter and Facebook and all those folks and Google in one way, but Amazon seems to me to be a very different sort of model, as is Apple, by the way. I mean, I think
Right.
Apple. I mean, that's not to say they don't have issues, but they're very different issues than the other. And
Yeah.
Amazon isn't pretending to do anything other than to track you so it can sell you stuff that you want.
Yeah, I mean, Apple with music, right? It's going to recommend music that it thinks you, or any content, right, that it thinks you would enjoy, and it uses it, internally in the Apple platform. Yeah, and Amazon's a shopping, it's a shopping site. You're there shopping, and it's going to feed you content based on your behavior, right? So based on what you search for, based on what you click on, based on what you don't click on, based on others like you. And within that, you go to Amazon to shop, either or to learn about products, right? But you're on the Amazon.com site for that purpose, and that's what they're doing. I don't think it's anything nefarious. Yeah, they're trying to sell you stuff, but when you go into a store and you have end caps and you have salespeople engaging with you, they're trying to sell stuff to you too. So I don't know that it's any worse, or there's anything negative about that. It's more effective. It's very effective, and again, Amazon doesn't it's all above board.
That may be too nuanced an argument to make to members of the Senate Antitrust Committee, who they refer to it as the Google machine, and their
right.
passwords are all password. But I mean, I think some kind of regulation of all these guys is
these companies have gotten so big so fast, right? They're the biggest companies in the history of the world. They're growing at rates that are just, breakneck speed, the rate of growth. It's been accelerated over the last year, given COVID and shifts related to that. Yeah, I mean, I think it does. They're big enough, they're significant enough that they should be held accountable. Let's see where they're coming from with with their approach, the regulators' approach on this. You'd hate to see them overreach. But if you're being anti-competitive and you're creating these a negative impact on customers and society, you should be held accountable for that, right? And we should rely on government to keep these companies honest. So anti-competitive is no good. Being a better solution, that you should be rewarded for that. Being anti-competitive, you should be challenged.
So if Senator Patty Murray, right, you're one of your two senators from Washington State, calls you up, probably not going to email you, calls you up on a landline. I'm picking on Senator Murray, I have no idea, and says, Tom, you know a lot about this. What's the one thing we should really think about before we start to impose regulations willy-nilly? What would you tell her?
I always come back to customer centricity. And are you benefiting the customer, not a user, right? And I do think that customers ultimately can be monetizable. Like, part of the business ecosystem can certainly be that the customer or the end user creates something that is monetizable, but it has to be done in the context of providing that person value, right? So if these platforms, whatever it may be, Amazon, Facebook, Google, Apple, Netflix, if they're providing a benefit to the consumer, right? They're making things cheaper, they're providing more selection, right? They're making them healthier, whatever. If they're doing things that can be seen as positive for them, then I think, yes, you want to keep these companies in check, but you should allow them, to continue to expand and further develop the business model. If it is not to the benefit of the customer, then that's when we should really be questioning it. And I don't think it's that hard to figure out if it's beneficial to the customer or
not. Yeah, and to go back what they said in the beginning, people have to realize that they're the product, right? And I do think it's fair to say most people don't.
I think most people don't. I think it's really sad when it comes to the social platforms. I think people do need to awaken to that. It's hard and it is addictive. People spend a lot of screen time, and that's how they interact with the world in a lot of cases. And
especially over the last 10 months.
Especially over the last 10 months.
And that's the remarkable thing. I mean, It's ironic, right, that they're being called to account in so many ways justifiably
Yeah,
for business models that to a great extent kept a lot of people sane. It
absolutely.
kept a lot of businesses in business over the last 10 months.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can
Totally
imagine
agree.
what this would have been like if we didn't have the internet.
Totally. Right.
Um,
When it comes to, when it comes to the Amazon side, and it's the commerce side of the internet or of the equation, um, I don't, I mean, yes, you could say the users are the product. I mean, you're still the customer though, right?
you're selling I mean, listen, I mean, they can communicate traffic information to manufacturers,
Oh,
and
they do for sure. Manufacturers pay for ad placements
but
for sure.
so does Walmart.
Right. Yeah,
Those,
so does Walmart. And on Amazon, when you're paying for an ad placement, you do see as a customer, you do see that it's sponsored. So there's nothing, it's overt, it's clear, it's transparent. Um, so I think it's fair. I think it's Amazon it's a fair trade, with their customers, right? You come here, yeah, we're gonna make some money in showing you these products, but we're also gonna make sure we show you the products you want, and you convert, these things to buying the products you need. The manufacturer gets a good return on that spend. You get a good experience. You get a great price. You found the product fast, and we're going to deliver it fast. So I think if you stay truly customer centric, it can be a pretty good trade.
well, it's going to be an ongoing conversation, and I'm sure we'll be back doing this more than a few times next year as some regulatory issue has popped up, or somebody has been hit by the EU with like a $10 billion fine, and we'll,
Totally.
we'll have a
Like
lot.
it said at the end of the like I said at the end of the social dilemma. I don't know if you caught that right before the credits. It said, "Follow us on social media." Just kidding.
Anyway, well, what was the Sophocles quote? With every great advancement comes a curse, and I
Yes.
think that's always important to remember. Well,
Absolutely.
listen, this is the end of the 2020 series of innovation conversations. As always, I really appreciate you're doing this. This is what I do for a living. This isn't what you do for a living,
Oh,
and
I love it.
I
Anytime.
appreciate the fact that you carve time out of your work week every other week to
I
do.
appreciate you having me, and I appreciate anybody that clicks and watches these things to the end, because sometimes they get a little long, but we love them.
Anyway, well, listen, I hope you and your family have a great holiday. And I will see you virtually, at least, in 2021.
Sounds awesome, Kevin. Have a great holiday, everyone.
Take care.